the 30s, a change was taking place in Oxford which gradually altered the lives of the people and every concept of what Oxford might have been. The unemployed situation got much bigger, and Dudley Edwards, a very well-known figure in those days, said we should try and get organised as unemployed. And we had to go down St Aldits, where the place is now, same place next to the police station. And we was to organise them down there to go marching into the streets around town with requests for this, that and the other. And the unemployed workers movement got very strong in Oxford, and we had demonstrations to London as well, trying to went to Parliament a couple of times, trying to stir them up with the idea that it wasn't good enough what they were doing and giving us. Dudley got a letter in the Oxford Mail saying that there were between 3,000 and 4,000 unemployed in those days, which was big because Oxford was quite a small town in the very early 30s. We always had to sign on every day at that time. The dole, I received 5 shillings a week. You won't get the rank and file to join anything like that today, not with our suggestions. Not yet, it may come, because old Maggie's tightening down all the time, and each week she's making it harder. But at the moment, she's clever enough to give us enough to keep us fairly quiet. They're not shouting all that much, are they? Or do you think they are? Because I don't.
I remember when the Claimants Union started in 1968. It became very successful. We had a person from Oxford who formulated the Claimants Union from the first start in Birmingham. We used to meet at the Cape of Good Hope, and we had lots of claimants, and I had a great experience of being in the chair of the Claimants Union and go to the DHS and to help to fight many claims. We were often accompanied by police in regard to being removed from the premises, carried out from the premises in some cases because we couldn't reach the claim or that were required for people that was in need. We had 13 activists in the Claimants Union, which was very active in the sense of doing most things for people that was in distress and in need. We decided to within the Claimants Union is to move in towards the housing problem, where we had to start the squatting. We got into difficulties with the council of occupying their premises, but within mass of lots of people, say for 50 or 60 people, would be there defending property. When the bailies came along to try to move them out, we were able to sustain them, to stop them from doing so.
There was a lull in the Claimants Union from 75, 76 onwards. At least I can't remember any activity. I think probably individuals at Uhuru took up particular issues.
At that time, the Claimants Union used to meet in Uhuru, the Uhuru Cafe, which is now a women's centre and women's cafe. We used to meet every week and just talk about the new social security regulations that were coming in then.
So it's very informal and very ad hoc, and it wasn't structured, and it was a bit anarchistic, not with a capital A. I think it was
the circle around it.
Yeah. Fragmented, but well. It was the beginnings, and I think people had a lot to learn then.
People decided that the best way to defend claimants' rights and generally get a better deal for claimants was to form a claimants' union again. At first, we had no base, so we were just meeting in people's houses. and we tried to publicise ourselves down at the Dole Quays by handing out leaflets. From what I remember, the first leaflets were mainly concerned with just telling people what their rights were, because first of all, that's a very immediate way, albeit small way, in which you can improve the lot of unemployed people. Actually make sure they get some of this, I don't know, £700 million a year, which goes unclaimed.
It seemed to us pretty awful what was going on then, and we sort of tried to think of ways of campaigning and of involving more people. That was the supplementary benefits review that was instituted by the last Labour government, would you believe? And the incoming Tory government in 1979 decided to more or less take over where Labour had left off. And it was things like cutting back the earnings-related supplement for unemployment benefit, which was quite a large element of unemployment benefit.
I felt from the start you've got to get a firm base. I mean, a firm sort of physical base, a firm financial base in terms of grants from the council. Okay, and having set that up, then what the Claimants Union is actually doing from 1 year to the next, its emphasis on, let's say, campaigning as opposed to individual welfare rights is obviously going to be a product of whoever's involved at the time.
We didn't ever sit down and evolve any strategy as such, say, well, this is going to be a long-term, this is what we're going to aim for. We sort of had an idea, but it was never really that carefully planned. I mean, that sort of came later. I mean, basically, we just sort of tried to, find ways in dealing with unemployment, and that was basically it.
It took a very long time to set it up because people wanted it to be the right kind of organisation, and the main emphasis was that this would be an organisation that was controlled and run by unemployed people, and I felt that they stuck to that as a major principle right the way through.
There were trade union set up unemployed centres which were running along certain lines, and then there were independent ones, and the sort of independent ones came more out of the Claimants Union type thing, whereas the unemployed centres, as I said, were more from the sort of trade union side of things. And we decided we wanted to have an independent sort of a centre because we knew that a lot of the trade union funded unemployed centres, there were a lot of strings attached. The way they were being run, they weren't allowed to do a lot of political campaigning and things like that. And we felt quite strongly that political campaigning was the thing that we wanted to do, and that was important. So we sort of tried to find ways in raising money that wouldn't involve having political strings attached.
We were meeting sometimes in this the top room of the Uhuru Cafe, sometimes in the East Oxford Community Centre back room, and so it was difficult for people to find, and it was difficult to get a sense of continuity. But I think a lot of people, especially, people at Barton Project seem to recognise that there was a lot of interest in having a claimants team. There had been a lot of people been involved before, and people wanted that kind of support service, and Barton were willing to help set it up and help establish it. And so I think there was just a small, I just remember there was a small core of us during 1981 who worked on trying to get secure premises and try and get funding so that we could actually sort of rebuild the organisation, because as I said, at that time it was at quite a low ebb.
We started having people for a support group who would help us get a premises somewhere. We were offered a room in Ruskin, at Ruskin College in Headington over the summer, so we met there, and that was obviously considerably nicer, and more people started coming to that. And after that, we had quite a good relationship with people at the Polytechnic, so they let us have a room there for a bit. And then through the Barton Project, through a community work thing, had been involved with a playgroup who was in this building. We heard that the playgroup was moving out of this building and moving into their building, which is now in East Oxford First School. And we thought this would be a great place, for us to go because it's quite reasonably central and reasonably accessible. I mean, when we moved in here, the building had been burned down. I mean, not burned down, but been quite severely damaged by fire, and it was sort of smoke damage everywhere and things. So we had to spend quite a lot of time cleaning it up and stuff. And we didn't really have a lot of, furnishings or floor coverings or anything like that. So we got a lot of stuff second-hand and from what people had let us have. And once we had approached, as I said before, the Public Affairs Committee and asked them for some money, and they decided to fund us. So some of the money was used to buy equipment like duplicators and, just basic things like tables and chairs and stuff like that.
There was a lot of opposition at that time, and it's been quite funny seeing since then that the Claimants Union, because it's now an accepted part of the city provision, just is able to get that support from the Labour group automatically. But so at the start, I think a lot of people were very wary of it as an organisation. To the kind of opposition you seem to get to funding anything new within the city. But I think it was with the grant and with the premises here, although these premises were kind of appallingly cold over the winter months, and really sort of, we put plastic all over the windows and things like that to try and heat the place up. But it was only when we got these premises that the organisation was able to really get going, as far as I could see, and I think that just made a difference.
We set up the first issue of the Unemployed Workers and Claimants News must have come out around about that time, I think 81 or early 82. So that was one of the first things we did. And we had several hundred printed, and we spent about a week standing outside the unemployment benefit office in St Aldate's and Marston Road and handed them out. And that brought quite a few people in, and I think at that time the group grew to about 14 or 15 people, so which was about one of the largest.
The way people from the Claimants Union looked at it was they didn't want a worker to have control over the group. They wanted it to exist as an autonomous group, and there was a feeling amongst quite a lot of people that if someone was paid to work, then the organisation would develop in a different kind of direction. And I think that's why they said that no one would have the job for very long, you would only have it for a few months, and then it would kind of like circulate amongst the members.
We then tried to sort of think again of popular and inverted commas campaigns that we could carry out to get more people involved, things that would benefit unemployed people, like low bus fares or even free bus fares was the first sort of thing we thought about. And
a lot of the work that we were involved in was straight welfare rights work, the sort of work that's also done by people at information centres like Barton, informing people of their rights as regards single payments. And I always felt that was very important because it's a way of getting more money immediately for some people. It's also a way of maintaining a presence down at Harcourt House, the DHSS offices, and attracting people into the organisation. So you'd have more people involved in sort of wider campaigning issues.
And another thing that we thought would be a really useful thing would be to have reduced price admission or free admission to things like cinemas and recreation facilities in Oxford. And several cinemas actually did give reduced price admissions to unemployed people as a result of our campaign. And I think also we should probably claim credit for getting reduced price or free recreation passes for people in Oxford.
I've worked all my life, I never drank, I keep myself to myself, and that's the way I want to finish my life, I said. And then all of a sudden I'm locked up for 3 weeks, grabbed by 2 policemen, and I'm just about getting over it now.
My memory of Operation Major really began on the first day itself when the claimants were arrested and taken to court. I got into from work that evening to receive a phone call to say that something like 300 people had been arrested in a DHSS swoop and that they were all being banged up in South Oxford Middle School, which is only a couple of minutes from where I live. I went straight down there, and the first people I came across were the Claimants Union pickets, who were still outside the school, where people were still being detained.
What was most dramatic about this operation was that it was something which had been carefully pre-planned, pre-arranged by the Thames Valley Police, and I think it was, well, as they called it themselves, Operation Major. It was the biggest operation they'd ever mounted.
This news sheet actually came out on the same day. You can see the Claimants Union logo on the top there. Perhaps I might just read a little bit of it quickly. It says, "One law for the rich, another for the poor. Between 250 and 300 claimants were arrested on the orders of the DHSS early this morning. They are all homeless or living in bed and breakfast. They were asked to sign on today at a special temporary DHSS office. When they arrived there this morning, they found it was, in fact, a temporary prison. They are still being held there at South Oxford Middle School, and many are still waiting to be charged. The police have admitted that they do not have evidence against all these people."
Claimants Defence Committee concentrated upon the first thing was provide what we called at the period court monitoring. This was to quite literally log all the court cases that were going on down at the magistrates' court. What had happened after the people were arrested on that Thursday in September was that a special magistrates' court was set up, and all the people were instantly remanded, and none of them were given bail. They could have asked for it, but they didn't realise that they could. Anyway, so we're trying to sort that problem out and make people more aware of their rights who are going through the process, and at the same time to have an independent source of information, to have error statistics about what happened, and to try and counteract the media and its deceptions.
We got that documented, and it's documented forever how the court system operated, and that justice was not done for anybody on that occasion.
It's true to say that the whole operation, from the Claimants Defence Committee and the Claimants Union point of view, was an opportunity for people perhaps to learn more about the law in a very short space of time than they'd ever known in the past. And what was noticeable, that the longer the cases went on, the more chance there was that defendants could actually find themselves acquitted to start with, as things were being rushed through, and we didn't really know what we were up against, and the defendants didn't know what they were up against. Then people were getting banged up, people were getting sent down right, left and centre.
I mean, I remember thinking at the time that this was quite a dramatic example of what a good networked community could actually do by way of an immediate response. It was really quite impressive.
You know, there was the official police line, the official DHS line, but there was no one for the media to talk to represent the claimants, you know, where the CDC happened, and they all came down to the press conferences and things like that.
Adam Gantz explained what had outraged people most about the swoop.
Its viciousness and its pointlessness, I think. Imagine, for example, if large numbers of people who'd gone into a tax office were all arrested because it was thought some of them might have been committing fraud, or every motorist that drove down the street was stopped and every licence checked because it was thought that one or two of them might have something wrong with their vehicle.
The big difference is in terms of the number of resources of staffing that you've put into investigating social security, so-called fraud, as to have been put into investigating inland revenue fraud.
Well, the techniques required are different in the two cases, and I'm not familiar with the exact techniques Inland Revenue uses. I think DHSS has a duty to use the most effective techniques that it can to prevent abuse of the benefit system.
It was established that residence cannot be established on one morning only, and so consequently, many of those people who were sent to prison, supposedly for fraud, weren't in fact defrauding anybody.
Well, can I come in straight away? I mean, the last half of what you've said is really, frankly, for the police and the courts, and it wouldn't really be proper for me as a DHSS minister to attempt to argue about that.
Not only are the DHSS pouring money into the pockets of the landlords, the amounts that they spent on Operation Major was revealed last week in the House of Commons as to be £21,000. And I feel that it's £21,000 that has been spent in making claimants afraid to sign on.
Now, who knows what effect that might have had when you had ministers of the Crown being cross-examined by people who had twice as much information, 3 times as much information as they did. And those were people from this well-briefed Claimants Union group. And who knows what effect that could have had on the thinking of these quite higher people in the government. We're not going to do this again.
We decided a number of longer-term objectives. One of them was to cooperate with a number of national organisations in the producing of a book called Poor Law, which came out in February of '83. Another objective, which was a bit more long-term and more ambitious, was to have a conference 1 year to the day after Operation Major to highlight what had happened and also to continue the battle against the media deceptions that had taken place.
For me, it was quite a depressing time, because although I think people put a very good fight in the wake of Operation Major and did win some major concessions as regards the amount of money people get who are no fixed abode. Subsequent, legislation means that people can only stay in bed and breakfast for like 4 weeks or so before moving on, and they seem to have tightened up a hell of a lot, especially in the area of bed and breakfast.
Well, events took a different lead about a fortnight later when the Department of Health and Social Security workers went on strike at Marston. I think this strike lasted for something like 13 weeks.
A relationship was forged between the Claimants Union and the people on strike at the DHS office at Marston Road. We went and joined them on the picket line. That, I don't think, we'd had plenty of pickets of the DHSS over problems affecting claimants, but now it was a problem for the staff. The staff were on strike because of their staffing levels. They were on strike for extra staff, and they went through, it was a bitter period for them to go through.
This is one of the tragedies of the whole unemployment situation, that the relationship between the unemployed and the existing political parties to a certain extent, and certainly with the trade unions, is not nearly as close as it should be. But nevertheless, the Trades Council did make a very brave situation of accepting the Claimants Union as a fully affiliated member, which it's illegal. I mean, it could have been, the Oxford Trades Council could have been disaffiliated from the Trades Union Congress and banned from existence for daring to take in the Claimants Union, because the Claimants Union is not a trade union affiliated to the TUC, and the TUC won't allow unemployed people to form a union and affiliate.
The importance of solidarity work, I think, has never been lost on the Claimants Union, and that showed itself during the miners' strike. Because again, the Claimants Union recognised that the miners were involved in a fight for jobs and a fight for their communities, and it was a struggle which they could immediately identify with. And when the NUM came up to work in this area, the Claimants Union lent its full weight and facilities to that struggle for jobs.
The miners' strike started, and we suddenly got inundated with miners from the Mardy area. It was an obvious place for them to come because they were on strike. They were actually in a situation of trying to claim benefits, although most of them were finding it very difficult because of the deductions of strike pay. So initially, although they were here using our offices, we were also able to help them and to try and sort out benefits back home in Wales and look at regulations and make leaflets for that.
It was quite interesting because when the South Wales Mardy miners first arrived in Oxford, they, I think, were slightly of the opinion that Oxford was very much part of the soft South, and nobody really knew what it was like to suffer hardship in Oxford. And very rapidly they changed their views, and by the end, they developed a lot of strong links and a lot of respect, but it was a slight sort of culture shock at the beginning, but didn't last very long. And we all got on like a house on fire, yeah. And they were tapping the phone as well at the time. They were tapping the phone quite heavily around Operation Major. In fact, they could hear them drinking coffee and chatting between themselves quite clearly on the phone.
Yeah, I remember picking up the phone actually.
Yeah.
And you got through to a building. I just picked it up and I could hear people talking.
Yeah.
From the other end.
Yeah.
I put it down because it's illegal to keep it on.
I'm sure you can do, and it's quite difficult to get in because it's so cheap.
I think the fraud squads were always good fun. I've forgotten about those actually. You were just going to say that, weren't you? Yeah, the first lot that I remember arrived in the end of 1984, about December 84, and they were Rabbits Regional Benefit Investigation Teams, now renamed Regional Fraud Teams. And there were about 6 of them. And I'd just become worker, that's how I remember it. And we were, basically we were given all the relevant information about them from, a source within the system. I mean, that's no secret. And we gave out thousands of leaflets and put posters around and went to a lot of interviews and taped quite a lot of them secretly.
In April 1985, the board and lodging regulations were implemented. They meant that anybody who was under 26 years old who didn't fit into one of the exemption categories could only stay in board and lodging for a period of 4 weeks in the Oxford area. It also meant that anybody whose board and lodging charges were, say, £65 or more, and that included meals, that would be the limit. What it meant in practice was that quite a lot of people were thrown out of where they were living, either sort of thrown out or were kind of not able to afford to pay the board and lodging charges anymore.
It was basically to keep people moving around, to stop people settling down. And, it just sort of led to a lot of young people having to sleep rough or having to move around every few weeks, reclaiming. And there was a lot of confusion because it was declared illegal at one point, and then they changed the law so it was legal. But there was a period, where people were being refused benefit quite illegally because it wasn't being done in the right way. So we managed to help some people on that score, and then they closed the loopholes, sort of thing. And it increased the pressure on the night cellar and the night shelter. We sent people down there who were homeless. They sent people to us, this night cellar and the night shelter, sent people to us for benefit advice. So yeah, it was a two-way thing. There've always been close links. I remember the debate that happened in the community centre, East Oxford Community Centre here on Cowley Road, on the subject of unemployment. At some point, Nonnie Tiffany, then Councillor Nonnie Tiffany, the Tory spokesperson, made this comment that she thought that the unemployed should try living on berries and porridge because when she was unemployed, she used to go out looking for berries, when she was hungry.
Well, I remember the porridge march. I mean, that was when Nonnie Tiffany hit the headlines about the unemployed eating berries and porridge. I mean, what a joke.
We got probably about 10, 20 active members and about sort of 100 people who are passive members. We probably have a couple of thousand people come through every year for help and advice.
We move up and down. Keep moving.
The unemployment statistics of young people coming out of school leavers. In 1980, 86% of school leavers got jobs immediately when they left school. Now, only 34% of school leavers get full-time jobs when they leave school. The rest of them are going either onto YTS schemes or they're unemployed.
I remember we had a lot of people coming down, you know, after leaving YTS and trying to claim benefit and having a lot of trouble over it. And that's my main memory of all that. And everyone saying that it was a waste of time, and I don't remember one person who actually said they enjoyed it.
Seems to us that JTS is actually a political tool. It's a way of clearing the books of unemployment statistics. It brings the numbers down. It's basically just juggling. It links up with other government schemes such as YTS and the Manpower Services Commission. And while a lot of these schemes have got something good about them, we feel that firstly they don't really create proper jobs which people can take pride in doing, and secondly that it's quite wrong to have to work for your benefit. It seems very unfair that you don't have the choice to go on one of these schemes. You either go on it or lose your benefit entirely.
The Fowler Review was in the air, and there was an opportunity to submit evidence that the Child Poverty Action Group with the Claimants Union did some brief research in Oxford and sent off this evidence to the Fowler Review, and some people from the Claimants Union and CPAG actually went up to the hearings to present that evidence. It had very little effect at all.
But we just couldn't really believe that it was true, really, in a way. And I remember telling people about it.
There are a bunch of claimants who've had problems with the Social Security, and we band together to add our experiences, and we give advice. We are in this building over here. Have you heard about the Fowler cuts?
Oh yes,
the Fowler government cuts.
Well, I mean, all benefits are being slashed by the Fowler Review. You know, a lot of young people have been badly hit. The bed and breakfast stuff's already come in. You know, I just wonder if you've got any views on that.
Do you know, we've got that many views. I don't want to. No, I just don't know how she thinks she can get away with it.
Yeah.
There's too many people. Why is she doing it to them?
That's a good question.
People still, you know, have trouble believing it today, you know, but unfortunately, and come April '88, it's all going to, the whole lot is going to come about, and all single payments are going to be abolished, and weekly editions and things like that.
One of the worst things about this system, which, I mean, it's entirely a terrible system. In fact, I've just thought of another terrible thing about it, but the two worst things, I think, are firstly that you won't get a loan unless the DHSS feel you can repay it. And the second problem is that the budget for the loan is going to be set.
And so one of the things we did was just stick up a said notice in the DHSS, so the people who sat there all day and have been sitting there all day and have been told in the end that they weren't allowed a payment, they've been refused a payment, instead of just going away depressed or shouting that some poor person who has the misfortune to work in the DHSS office would have some idea that, look, there's somewhere where they might be able to go next. But it took a year of arguing with the DHS to even get them to agree to put up said poster. I mean, it's, you know, and it took 2 years to persuade the unemployment benefit to put it up.
If people would care to come to us and ask us what their rights are, we would tell them. Because in my opinion, there's 75% of the people walking around the roads that is not aware of their facts, and they don't know what their rights are. They come to us, we help them. We also published a local magazine called the Yard Times. But my word to advice to any person is claim it now. Don't wait till April, claim it now. Otherwise you haven't got a chance of claiming anything, hardly.
But you're a week adrift.
Yeah.
Right. Phone up for you. You behave yourself.
And do you go and get like a couple of estimates?
Yeah.
You want to get yourself signed up for electricity as well?
Yeah, in our
yeah.
Right, and we'll leave the meeting.
Right, so what, my rent will get paid automatically? Is that? Right. Okay, so my first move is to go to Marston Road.
And would it be that you have to uniform and science and so on?
Yeah, well, they want the money in order.
Oh, yeah.
They'll be dealing with it in the next day or two, though. Just have your papers for it.
Okay. How long was you working for? So I'll go and see them today at some point. I'll probably go back Friday.
Claimants Union is a focal point for people who are unemployed, and I think unemployment hits people in varying ways, and for some people, a lot of people I would say, their confidence is just not completely, and I think being able to have somebody, a group that you can identify with, that is monitoring your rights and lobbying and is a pressure group, can actually help make you feel better, and it's actually somewhere to go in the day. I think some identification is so important when you're unemployed, because you feel so disenfranchised from everything. I would like to see the Claimants Union affiliated to the trades union movement, and I think it's quite scandalous that it isn't.
A much better set up to have than either a TUC kind of sponsored unemployed centre, which is run through the TUC, or an advice centre like Citizens Advice Bureau. I think it's starting from the people that I'm trying to think of a good way of phrasing that. It's just an approachable organisation.
The trade union movement needs active, politically sensible people who want to do things, and it needs people such as the people who are in the Claimants Union. I think it's a shame that the Claimants Union people are not allowed to get involved in the trade union movement. It would help them, and it would also help the trade union movement, and it's a real shame.
The Tories have created an underclass of people who've got very little prospect of ever getting a job.
I think the Claimants Union puts forward the point of view very strongly that it's that unemployed people can be just as full human beings and can spend just as useful, if not more useful, lives than employed people, and that they have a right to be supported financially in doing that. All I can say is what they're doing is you're trying to force issues onto the agenda somehow or other, which aren't on the agenda of any of the political parties. And you look at the last election, there was almost not mentioned, the social fund, the abolition of single payments, what was happening to social security was not on TV. People didn't talk about it much. It wasn't on the agenda, mate. It was low on the agenda. I don't know, somewhere like 9 or 10 or something like that on the agenda for people talking about it. And the idea is to force it onto the agenda by making people talking and making it into an issue. Yeah, I mean, one of the big problems with being on the dole is that you can end up being isolated. Maybe people who've just moved to the area or who've just lost their job, after working for a long time. And, once you've got your claim, I mean, what do you actually do,
When the rest of the town organises between Monday and Friday.
Right, yeah. And, with the Claimants Union, you can go down, Claimants Union, do something, have a cup of tea and...
It's very good to see that the Claimants Union is now still continuing in helping people for their needs. It's much harder now than what it was in 1968. But it's all credit to the people who of the Claimants Union. It's a great thing in Oxford to be able to come to, if anybody who has claims or in difficulties, to come along to Princes Street, Cowley Road.
And we shan't give up until whenever we've achieved whatever we're trying to achieve, which is a fair deal for the claimants.